I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined as always by my wondering co-host, Brett.
Wondering. I have often wondered, and many of my questions have been answered by one of the greatest true crime podcasts of all time, Generation Y. And I mentioned that for no reason at all.
No reason at all, except wait a second. Who do we have here? We are so graced with Aaron's presence. Aaron Habel, thank you for being here with us. Truly, I don't think it's an overstatement to say your podcast, Generation Y, coming out back in 2012, 13 years ago and counting, truly kind of set the stage for true crime podcasts as we know them today. And you have been in the space and seen the good and the bad and the developments of true crime media. Thank you so much for being here, Aaron.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, really what it comes down to is I think what we did is we helped pave the way for people to come on and feel free to talk about subjects. And we just happen to want to talk about a lot of crime stuff. But over the years, I've found that many other people have gotten involved, and some of them have backgrounds in law enforcement, attorneys, etc. But then you also have the people who they just want something. Like Justin and I were always wanting justice. And justice, it doesn't come easy. I mean, you know, if you're attorneys, you have to fight for it. And the fights are never easy.
So now you're a household name. But 13 years ago, when podcasting was still a relatively new medium and it was not your full-time job at all, can you kind of take us back to 2012? Why did you and Justin decide to start a podcast, and how did you even go about it?
Well, the quick story is that Justin contacted me because he was serving as a juror and he was really excited about it. So, of course, he couldn't talk to me until the whole thing was over, but it ended in like 5 days. And as he puts it, he had no idea that within 5 days he would be voting to send someone off to prison. And so with all of that said, he wanted to talk to people about it and say, you know, if you haven't served on a first-degree murder trial, here are some things you might not have heard about before or expected, because we all have in our brains what sounds logical or reasonable. But when you actually are in a trial and they're having to talk about the evidence they collected, what they couldn't find. I mean, when you can't find a fingerprint from someone who lives at the home, things like that, you just don't expect it. So he wanted to talk about it and he didn't know what to do with it. But he knew by calling me, because I'm good at planning things, maybe Aaron will have an idea. And I said, you're calling because you want to start a podcast. And in classic Justin lingo, he just says something like, sure. That's how it started.
I didn't think I knew what a podcast was in 2012. How did you pull that idea out of the air?
Well, I was listening to podcasts. I'll make no secret that my very favorite medium is audio. And so I've listened to audiobooks. I've listened to old time radio, especially music, for many years. And then when I found out about podcasts back in, I want to say it was 2004 or 5, I got hooked immediately. So I started listening to This American Life. I listened to some comedians. I've listened to a lot of science shows. And so when it came time to start our own show, all I knew was that I needed to get a microphone.
And that's all you need. That's the new media. And I have to say, this is an opportunity to thank you, because your show, I remember, so I listened to Serial, I guess that was 2014. And then didn't really listen to podcasts for a while, but then got into true crime through books. And at some point, and actually Paradise Lost. And at some point, I was like, I want to start listening to these true crime podcasts I hear so much about. And so I Googled like good true crime podcast, you know, really researching deeply, and Reddit had a thread and they were complaining about two podcasts, True Crime Garage and Generation Y. And I thought, well, if Reddit is complaining, then this is my jam. And so I started listening to True Crime Garage and to Generation Y. And really, those two podcasts are the format, the basis for what we do. I mean, we modeled our show very much after you guys, and you guys in particular. I can remember, I'm going to tell a embarrassing story. I'm embarrassed by it.
For who? For you or I?
For me. It's for me. So there was a time where I considered the possibility that Jeffrey McDonald was innocent.
Oh, that is embarrassing.
He had been framed, and it was the floppy-hatted woman. And I read Forest of Error or whatever it is. Drove around the base trying to find the house. Didn't realize it had been torn down. Like all this stuff, right? And then I listened to y'all's podcast, and by the end of it, I was like, "Wow, this is just so obvious. It's so obvious this guy did it." And it really sort of changed the way I looked at it. And I think, as I said, when we now do episodes, we're trying to do the same kind of deep dives, the same kind of really evidence-based, rationality-based analysis that you guys brought, not the conspiracy theories, not the sexy theories, but what actually happened.
Yeah, it's a big deal with us. I think any one of us could make a mistake on a case, but where are you coming from? I mean, with me, I really want them to get it right. And so when people start espousing conspiracy theories that require a lot of mental gymnastics, it starts to lose its grip on me. So I really want to know what happened, and I want there to be justice. And sometimes we don't get it. And that's the tough thing.
So while that's like music to our ears in terms of wanting to know what's true and what's justice in a case, that really is counter to a lot of media. A lot of media back then, now, which is about sensationalism and about getting clicks and about getting eyeballs, even if it is far afield from truth. So, well, this is like the meta question, but what drove you to go for the not sexy theory, the not sexy stories, but to tell it as it is when you were starting out? And why do you continue to do that 13 years later when we've seen many, shall we say, sensationalists who have flamed, and some stayed, but many have gone?
Well, I really think it has a lot to do with my being a skeptic. And so one of the things I noticed many years ago was, and I'm sure you've seen this on these ghost shows, there'll be a little light that floats around in a yard or in a room, and people say, "There's a spirit. I saw it. Do you see the spirit moving around?" And I either just see a speck of dust or I see a moth. I don't see what they see. And that's what drives me crazy, is when people say, "Oh, I see a child in the room now" on these live ghost shows, and there's nothing there.
Now, let's not be too hard on ghosts now.
Chiming in saying there's the child.
Brett loves ghosts, so
Yeah, I love ghosts. So you kind of
agrees with you with everything.
feelings. But
I'll go with you to look for a ghost in a house. I have no problem with that.
I love that. I love that you said skeptic, because while you say skeptic, I think that's just using your brain, right? Your God-given brain to think through issues. And when something appears, you're not a law enforcement officer, is that right? But to be able to have that critical view, really, that's what an investigator is, right? Everyone's always like, "Oh, there must be some massive conspiracy." But what people perhaps want to forget is that investigators, police officers are human beings called to use their judgment in their job. And so us as true crime media commentators are called to do the same, unless you choose to go with the sexy theories and throw rational thinking out the window. But kind of with that, how do you choose which cases to cover, especially in, more than a decade of viewing these? And then obviously I'll get into what have been your favorite and what has captured your attention.
Well, I'm sure you encounter this too, but you have an audience that chimes in and says, "We want to hear you talk about this case." We also have people who are family members who are related to cases. They'll chime in and say, "Well, my son this, my aunt that." And then we want to help them get the word out, or at least tell the story. We found that most people who hear us cover their loved one's story, they're usually very thankful. We have some great emails. We've had some great phone calls with people along the way saying, "I really like how you gave so much respect to the victim," or how you pointed out whether something went right or went wrong, or how things could be improved. I mean, that's really what we try to pride ourselves on, is coming up with how would we do this differently, or does the law need to change, or there was something controversial that happened. Is it enough to upset the case? And just talk about those things, because we feel like there are so many things to discuss in any one case. And I mean, yeah, the verdict's important, but there's so many other things along the way.
And one thing you guys, I've always thought you do really well, and I'm interested to know how you handle it, because I don't think it's easy to thread this needle. You're not afraid to say, "This is a wrongful conviction. This person's innocent." And sometimes that conflicts with the victims, right? And a lot of times the victim's family are very much like, "What are you doing? Why are you supporting the murderer of my daughter," for instance, right? And it can be very difficult to both respect victims and honor victims, but also be willing to say, this person who was convicted and this family thought that they had justice for decades, they're wrong, and really sort of reopening wounds. I mean, y'all do a really good job of maintaining that balance. Does that just come naturally for you, or is that something you have to work at?
I just want to say what's on my mind. I try not to say anything that I'll later regret, but like anyone else, I've had some episodes I wish I could go back and change. But, a good one that came out a while ago that I'm a big believer in is, I believe his name is Travis Adams with the Holly Bobo case. I'm not convinced he had anything to do with that. I think the whole case is nothing. I think it's all nothing. I think they missed who they should have gone after. And so that's a case that bothers me. I feel like it could have been handled so much better.
Before we dive into some of your favorite or least favorite cases, we're relative newbies in that we've only been in this space for 5 years. But a lot of the media landscape and a lot of the way we view victims, the way we view law enforcement, the way we view whether people are rightfully or wrongfully in prison has really gone through a roller coaster the past decade or so. Have you seen it through your lens as a media commentator in this space of any changes? And do you think those are good changes, or it's all the same and more of the same in terms of your perspective?
Well, I'm actually concerned right now because I feel like so many other things in our culture that things are becoming more of a popularity contest, more of a reality show, and less about the actual trial, less about the evidence. So I do worry that going forward, we're going to have more people printing up T-shirts and carrying signs when I think we're missing the point. I think everyone should have their say. And if they feel someone's innocent, they should do something about that. But it just has this circus feel that I haven't been able to embrace.
Whatever case could you be referring to with printing T-shirts and carrying signs and
we just saw it with the Karen Reed trial, and I'm happy to talk about that one because I think there are a lot of problems with that case, but it's just the way the public is dealing with it. It just feels like too much of a circus. It feels like a reality show.
And, we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, and you were pointing out legitimate issues in that case, and legitimate problems for the prosecution, and legitimate reasons that Karen Reed could have been acquitted. But it seems like so much of that did get lost in sort of the circus. And before we get to the Karen Reed case itself, I am curious. So you're kind of a historian of true crime at this point. So you have seen that kind of develop and change over the years. You have it's almost like political or religious or like a sporting event. You have your team and we have our team and we're rooting for our team. And it's not about truth. It's about winning. Does that feel like that's something we're seeing more and more of in your experience?
Yeah. And I think I would appreciate it better if when I see these debates, whether they're in public or online, if someone would just approach it with, well, what I found most compelling was, but instead we get, oh, this person's a windbag and this person's corrupt and this person is dumb as a box of rocks. And it's really just descended into something that's not anything you can hold up as like, wow, this was amazing. I mean, I still have a bad taste in my mouth from the trial, and it's just, it became a circus. And there are so many, I just can't even think of, I'm not one to worry about foul language myself, but man, even I was thinking this is worse than an Eddie Murphy concert.
So I agree with you that the environment feels different. And we've always, historically, not just in the last 10 years, not in the last 100 years, really for all time, we've been drawn to the salacious and true crime in some sense. But what do you think has fed to where we are today with this kind of almost cultish following, the circus you described it as? What about the landscape allowed for the fertile ground of what we saw in the Karen Reed trial, but also in other cases that I think have elements of what we're seeing in the Karen Reed case?
Yeah, it's just getting bigger. I think it's social media. Social media, we're all trying to get the clicks, I guess. And so it's almost as if we're trying to satisfy a boss somewhere. Like the boss is saying, hey, you need more interaction, you need more clicks. So then what we have to do is dial everything up. If you just get on and just tell your truth, how you see things based on your experience, what you found compelling, etc. I don't know how many clicks and likes that's going to get. But at least if you do it that way, you're being true to yourself. Other people, they know how to dial in and get the audience fired up. These are the same people that could be running WWE shows, I suppose.
But you put the lie to that, right? I mean, you guys have been doing this successfully for 13 years. One of the most popular true crime podcasts in the world. And you don't do that. You don't chase clicks. You're not out there trying to drum up sexy theories or controversy. I mean, and yet you've been successful. So it is possible. It is possible to do it in the way that you're describing and be successful. You don't have to give in to the click machine.
No, you just have to find your audience.
Yeah, I guess some people's audience is the crazy people, but
Well, think about Jerry Springer, right?
Exactly. But Oprah's audience was bigger, right? I mean,
well,
I don't know.
I mean, she did have the check under your seat.
That's a good point. Maybe we should do that.
I don't know how to
Everyone
do that.
listening right now, you're getting a new car.
You're getting a new car. And then having
So-
Tom Cruise dance on your couch doesn't hurt either.
So let me ask you this. You've touched on it sort of peripherally, but I'm interested in your thoughts on this. What do you think the effect is on the justice system going forward? A new media, and I don't want to give the old media a pass because they're as much a part of this as the new media. Everybody wants to act like it's just people on YouTube. It's not. But what do you think the effect will be on the justice system and getting justice both for victims and for the accused of this sort of circus-like atmosphere that I think, given what happened in Karen Reed and the success that she had, we will see replicated in other cases, particularly big famous cases across the country?
Yeah, I don't know that I could blame the media for what happened there or why things went the way they did necessarily. I told you before, I think it was a pretty rough case to begin with. But I will say, I'm a firm believer that things need to evolve. And so with the power of the judge, I think things can be managed, but I think judges will have to educate themselves on the new threats. You know, is it normal to have people who are tied to a case getting threats all the time? I mean, something needs to be done. So I feel like the first line of defense is the judge because they can control that courtroom.
The only problem is I know they can control the courtroom, but I wonder if they can control the media. I feel like judges, maybe you're right. I mean, maybe education is a big part of this because judges and courts are slow to adapt. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, we like the fact that our court system is built on decades and centuries of slow development. And then you have the famous name is Dr. Shepard case that they made the fugitive into. And that was a big case. Yeah, exactly. And that case became a big deal, led to Supreme Court cases, the birth of gag orders, all that stuff comes from that case. And that was a reaction to the mainstream media, newspapers, broadcast television. Then, I guess probably the next big case development's OJ, right? Then you have OJ, and then you have 24-hour news, and you have court TV, and you have dedicated commentators. And how do you deal with that? That's nothing compared to what you have now. I mean, now you have YouTube channels and idiots like us, and you have Twitter and all the social media. And I just wonder if courts are even able to adapt quickly enough to these, as you said, new threats.
Yeah, no, I really feel like they will. Whether they can do it at the speed we'd like to see, I think there's a lot to what you said about courts have tended to change slowly based on we need a lot of precedents here. We need to have real good reasons to change something. But I think the public themselves, even myself included possibly, because I stay away from it mostly, but I don't think we're really equipped to handle social media either. I think even those in the public are still trying to figure out what to do with this thing. It feels like you could put AI behind it and everybody would just say, where to next? It feels like it drives people constantly. And I think that's something we as a society should look at for ourselves. We don't need anyone to tell us to have to do it, but we should think about it and do something on our own.
And I think, a really good and difficult thing. We are beneficiaries of a media platform that has very low barriers to entry. We didn't have to go to journalism school. You don't have to. You could have. You didn't have to sign on to one of the big, networks to be able to get your voice out there. I think that's great for getting diversity of viewpoints. But because we do have all these voices, it can be difficult for courts and for the public to know what is the difference between these two podcasts. They're all available on all the same platforms. Let's say they all have the same number of reviews. They're all, crowdsourced reviews at that. How do we even know what quality is from truly just conspiracy theories? And we've talked a lot about, I know with you as well, the need for some sort of gatekeeping is not the right word, but true crime media ethics, right? There's no such thing. There's ethics within journalism. There's ethics within practicing the law. And there's ethics in practicing medicine, for example. But this new age media, there isn't something like that. I don't know that we necessarily want to impose something, because who decides that they are the new media king or queen, right? I'm not sure that I want to follow whoever decides that they themselves are the king or queen. And so I do see this, there are so many benefits to the low barriers to entry for more voices, but at the same time, especially when it comes to courts, decipher, what are the voices that can be trusted or that abide by self-imposed ethics is difficult. And that education may lie in podcasts like your own that has been around for a long time. We try to do something like that as well. But I'm just thinking out loud for how you approach this problem without being draconian, because we do live in a country of free speech. And that is the beauty of where we are and how we're able to speak in so many different viewpoints.
Yeah, I really think it's going to be on the judge personally. They can actually make statements to the court. Those things do get passed along via YouTube, via court TV. I think it can have a great effect on things. Now, I don't know that you can stop the public from being the public, but I do have hope that maybe we can corral this in some way. It's just that, when you bring up this is kind of like a football game, and out my way, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, if they're up against the Denver Broncos, that's a big deal. And the two sides do not like each other. The coaches shake after the game's over, but leading up to that, it's pretty rough. And that's what we see in these trials now. And it's probably going to get worse for a while. I just hope that people would educate themselves and see what's important here. I would love to see, again, debates where people are actually bringing up the issues and not simply calling each other names, because it feels like it cheapens the whole process. Even though I know they're not the ones deciding anything in the courtroom, perception is everything.
So I'm curious, and Alice mentioned this earlier. This is a different sort of changing topic slightly, so feel free to go back to that topic. But I think with our podcast, every podcast, I think, has like a case where they sort of went from, oh, we're just doing this or whatever, to people really liked it, right? So for us, the case that people always point to is Dyatlov Pass, which is kind of weird because it's not even a true crime case, but it's one that people repeatedly say, like, that was what got me hooked on your show. I think if you ask True Crime Garage, they would probably say The Boys on the Tracks was their case that sort of...
That's a big one for them.
Yeah, a big one for them. And I still remember that, right? And I still remember listening to it. I remember where I was listening to it, which might be kind of weird. What do you think it is for you guys? What is the case that, whenever it happened over the last 13 years, you were like, we really got something?
That's a great question. I think part of the problem is we were early adopters. We got into it early. And so people would almost like, you had the fans, you had the people that really liked us. Then you had people who were just like, well, I like to listen to stuff about crime, so I'll listen to you guys. And then we had people that didn't like us and listened to us because they didn't like us.
We love hate listens. Hate listens are still listens.
Yeah, hate listens. I don't think it's as common now, but it still happens. We have a few people that write in here and there, and I can tell they don't like anything we do pretty much. But, sometimes I joke to myself and I think, well, they didn't write in about this one, so I think they secretly liked that episode. These people tend to write in and complain about something, And the other beauty of podcasting is you might know who you are internally. You might know what your own morals are, what your politics are, but then you have people assigning you things where you don't even know where they got it from. We literally had in Apple, iTunes, whatever it was, we had 2 reviews back to back. One was, you guys just watch Fox News all day and then record. And then the other one was, you guys, only watch CNN. Or I was like, where is this coming from? So I found that pretty ridiculous. But it just goes to show, when it comes out of your mouth and it goes into someone else's ear hole, you have no idea what they're going to do with it.
I mean, one of my favorite recent 1-star reviews for us was, they love our podcast, but they wish that we were more upfront about the fact that we have a bias towards prosecutors. And I was like, did you see the title of our podcast?
Oh, I missed that. Oh my goodness.
But you're right about that. When people first came on, there's like an entire slew of people on Reddit who are adamant that I am a blonde woman. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Never once was I a blonde woman, but they're adamant about it. And that's not even, I guess it's tied to my voice. They think that, which is, a funny example of something that's absolutely non-substantive, but people are tied to.
Yeah, let me ask you a question though. So on your show, have you ever covered a case where you were completely against the prosecutors in the case? And
Oh, yeah.
people were surprised by that.
Absolutely.
Well, what's funny about it is it doesn't matter how many times we do that. People still say we always agree with the prosecution. You know, like, well, we do cases. I don't know if you've covered any of these cases. I forget. But like we did the Leo Schofield case, which was Bone Valley. And we did Pablo Velez Jr. I don't know if you've done that case. Such an obvious wrongful conviction. Just
He's like 80 miles away.
and basically his father was a drug dealer. This is what happened in that case. His father was a drug dealer. Some gangs got into a shootout. Some people died. And the cops were like, whatever, he's in the game. So even though he actually wasn't involved at all, he's a truck driver, like a perfectly legitimate guy. Didn't have anything to do with his dad's dealings. But that was exactly what happened. And they hid information. They didn't share exculpatory information with the defense. And yeah, I mean, we're all about that. Now, there are plenty of cases where we take the opposite view that the prosecution has been unjustly attacked and we defend them. And we do that in famous cases. But yeah, we do that all the time. And I think it's important to do that. And as a prosecutor, I think it's really important to call out prosecutors who don't do their job. And their job, and the great thing about being a prosecutor, is we're always supposed to be seeking justice, right? People say prosecutors just want to win. That should never be true. That's really the defense attorney's job. The defense attorney is always trying to win because his job is to win for his client. Our job is supposed to be to do justice. And if that means dismiss a case, not bring a case, say somebody was convicted unjustly, then that's what we should do. So yeah, we're always have to do that. But what's funny, and this is why we always tell people, you cannot play to the critics, because the critics don't actually care about reality. Like we've gotten at least 3 reviews recently that say these people even think Derek Chauvin's innocent. When we did 5 episodes on that trial, concluding that he was guilty before the verdict came down. And it's like, you know, reality doesn't matter a lot of times for the people who hate you because they just hate you. They don't care about truth. So,
well, and that's one thing that bothers me is when I know for a fact I made a statement and I was very clear about it. And then someone will come along and totally get it wrong and say that I said something else. So it's a little frustrating, but yeah, we can't change anything for those people because, I mean, they probably have an issue.
Have you guys done the Darlie Routier case yet?
Yes. So here's the story with Darlie Routier. You brought up a case earlier that I'm really passionate about, but the Darlie Routier might be the number one case for me where I've had long debates with people about it because she is so, I mean, to me, it's overwhelming how much evidence there is as to her guilt. And I've had people say, oh no, she's not guilty. I don't know if you've looked into all the nonsense that's happened over the years with that case, where even her supporters were trying to raise money for DNA testing and things like that. When if you know anything about the law in Texas on a death penalty case, you don't need to raise money for that. So what's the money for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Great question.
I practiced in Texas. Yeah. Clerked for judges who got death penalty cases. So I've seen that very intimately.
Yeah, that's one that was obviously controversial that we did. I mean, and I don't think, you know, we don't agree on everything. And as you said earlier, you look at different cases. It's perfectly fine to look at a case, review the evidence, and come out on different sides. That's not a problem. I wish people could just, I don't know, chill out a little bit. Is that too much to ask? You know?
Chill should be the new word. People should be looking to chill.
Okay.
And relax. But, you know, when you have a country that cares about who's dating who, then even the courts are going to suffer, I suppose.
So I have a question for you because you raised this earlier, and the answer might just be that, you know, we're lost and everything's going to fall to shambles. But you noted that there are some people who can be confronted with all the evidence in the world, and you say A and they hear Z, no matter what. They can see the exact same video as you. They can see a video of a Lexus SUV backing into an arm and shattering at 24 miles per hour. And they can say, nope, you know, that never happened. While I understand that they may never change their mind, we obviously continue to talk because we think at least I do, that there's still some hope in being able to use our voices of reason to do just that, reason. And certainly in the practice of law, if we lose the ability to communicate with people about what the truth is, I do think that is the beginning of the end for seeking justice in these types of cases. So I am not ready to throw in the towel yet. So I'm asking you for your expertise. Like, what are the steps we can take to counter a very disturbing trend that we're seeing, which is that we're all looking at the same thing, but no matter what, one side will say, I will never agree with you, or even if I see this, truth is what I determine truth to be.
I don't know. I'm a firm believer that you're going to have people who play devil's advocate all the time, you know, and I'm sure you've spent some time around some defense attorneys who you're literally throwing spaghetti at the wall at this point, and they will deny it all day long. Oh no, I'm just raising all the reasonable doubt here. There are lots of problems with this case. And you're like, yeah, I think you're completely missing it on this case. But look, I had a few debates over just even the Alec Murdaugh case. And I mean, that guy was guilty as the day is long. I mean, that was one of my favorite cases because you literally had the prosecutor, the guy that made the call here to prosecute Alec Murdaugh. I mean, he basically admitted that they're on the same team usually, but he said, no one's going to be able to commit a crime in South Carolina and get away with it. Not on my watch. So that gave me some hope because I thought, hey, it doesn't matter if you're on the same team. If someone breaks the law, they should be punished for it. And sure enough, they took him to trial and they won. So that's all I want. I want justice despite whatever protections there might be for somebody.
I want you to end the debate once and for all as the elder statesman of true crime. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I guess so.
How do you pronounce the name of the defendant in the case you were just discussing?
Well, I say Alec Murdaugh because that's how he says it. And that's how everyone down there says it. So
does he say it or does he say it
many
different ways? He says it like 10 different ways. I don't think he knows how to say his name, to be fair.
A lot of people say it that way. Now, if you just look at it, it looks like Alex Murdaugh, right?
It does.
Yes.
But I thought it was Murdaugh. I don't know if you watched the video footage, but they started talking about guineas and chickens, his wife and son. I don't know why.
We had a lot of fun with the name
all the time.
That was a great case. I look back on that case as like the golden days of true crime. Like it was so long ago. Like that case was controversial in this sort of very playful way, right? Like you compare that case to Karen Reed, there's just it's a different world in the way those cases existed.
Yeah. But even, even the Murdaugh case, that one, they won that case essentially not because of just all the hard work, but because when Alec had to come down and testify and admit that his voice is on the video. As soon as he did that, it was over. And I remember talking with a defense attorney who was trying to tell me, oh no, they've got so much to work with. I said, you can kiss this guy goodbye. He's gone. And I was right, but it was so obvious.
I agree with you. And then I know we keep coming back to it. We just finished a trial where Karen Reed's own voice was played over and over that the jurors heard, and yet a very different outcome. But before we get there, I know we keep going back to it.
Well, you're gonna get me to say something,
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna point out, the people that, I mean, obviously they have some supporters on KR's team they're just blind followers, but there are some troubling things in there. I mean, if you think about I'll just say some words: smartphone, dog, no search. When you say those things and you're trying to do an investigation, you're literally ignoring a bunch of things. It's going to cause people to be suspicious. And one thing, no matter what I think happened in the case that I firmly believe in, is we can't just award a case to a prosecution and give it to them despite all the problems that they had. I mean, I don't know if you were bothered, but I was bothered by the lead investigator's language that he used about the defendant. And I mean, if it was my daughter that was being spoken of that way, I'd have a major problem with him. And I was already bothered, and I'm not even related to Karen.
Yeah, I mean, he was a problem, and he was sort of the gift that kept on giving to the defense. And they came back to that a lot. And I guess this is where I think maybe sometimes I have blinders, because for me, I can say, oh, yeah, he shouldn't have done that. But it has no effect on how I view the evidence, because it's like, but the evidence is the evidence. Like, I mean, him calling her bad names didn't put her taillight in John's shirt, right? Like, I see how it bothers people, and I can even see how it makes people say, look, I have an initial question here. Like, could this guy have framed her? Could he have planted evidence? But then you look at the evidence like, well, he didn't plant evidence under 2 feet of snow. Like, he probably didn't stick taillight pieces in her shirt. Okay, he's not the one who says, I know I said I hit him. He's not the one doing X, Y, and Z, right? So it's easy for me to get past that. But certainly it is the case that there were jurors who didn't get past that and have said that. that they were very troubled by that. And we talk about this, and this will be discussed in trainings with law enforcement around the country. There was a statewide police meeting, and we had the opportunity to speak to a couple hundred law enforcement officers from across the state. We did the Karen Reed case, and we went through the evidence and how damning it was. And then we went to the defense, and this was from the first trial, obviously. And David Unetti, the first thing he says is Karen Reed is framed. And then we went through what Proctor did. We played the governor of Massachusetts condemning it, and the fact that at that point it was a hung jury. And now if we update that training, it'll be that, she was not guilty. And we tell officers, this is what can happen to your case, where in this case, a fellow officer has died. The evidence is overwhelming.
He dropped off. He got so excited. He got so excited about it.
Let me jump in here for a minute because what Brett was saying is really important because, sometimes when you think there's a loss, like you really believe, oh, well, Karen Reed seemed guilty to me. There's a loss there. But wait, if something good comes out of it, if it really highlights the importance of professionalism within law enforcement, then I think it would pay dividends. I think we could see some great things happen down the road because of the training that could come out of this.
Oh, absolutely. And, from our perspective, we don't practice in Massachusetts. I can't speak for them. But generally, the investigator we're talking about, Proctor, he is generally an anomaly. And that is what is so sad about this. He gives a terrible name in the way that he spoke so unprofessionally about the case to his friends. It doesn't matter if he was on the clock or off the clock. That was absolutely inappropriate. Most law enforcement officers that we know don't do that. And I would even say most law enforcement officers in the Karen Reed case didn't do that. Now, the fact that the lead investigator was doing that doesn't excuse it, but it certainly absolutely taints the taste in the jury's mind. And of course it did, even though he wasn't called in the second trial. Certainly it was on their mind, as you can now see that they're giving interviews. So do you think then that the prosecution just didn't do their job and didn't meet it? Because there's two separate things. There's the outcome of the trial, and then there's the media circus. And I do think those are two separate things. They're obviously very tied because in this instance, the kind of media outcry and the movement matched ultimately what happened with the jury's verdict. That's not always the case. So splicing it into those two, first with the trial, do you think that the jury came to the right conclusion because the prosecution or the Commonwealth didn't meet their burden, which is always the prosecution's burden to prove their case?
Yeah, I think you would get a lot of different answers from different people. I did an episode on this with Justin. We both felt like the evidence was not in her favor. But I will say, after having gone through the second trial, I think what stood out is there was just too much doubt. It hurts your case when you have a bad lead investigator, an unprofessional one, I should say, and then you can't even bring him on to talk about his investigation. It's a big miss. And they didn't really have a choice. And that's why I said, I don't care if you put Creighton Waters in there. I don't know that any prosecutor could have won that case based on how things went. And one of the things that I've heard over and over from my listeners, because it seemed like there were more listeners who listened to us who felt like she might not have done it, or if she did, it was an accident. But what I heard time and time again is they cannot look at John O'Keefe's arm and say that was the result of a car accident, like a collision with a vehicle. So they really think that that's from a dog attack. And, I spent a lot of time today really going over those pictures again. And I mean, you got to give it to them. It's on the table, So it just, there's too much doubt there. And I don't know that anybody could have done this case in a way to win it for the prosecution. I just don't think so.
So there's that angle. Do you think it would have been any different if there were no media attention on this whatsoever? Or did it highlight the problems that the investigation faced? Because this case caught, right? I mean, not every case gets the amount of international or national attention as this case. So I certainly think that the media campaign, really, that the defense was also part of, did have a real visceral outcome that ultimately found its way into the jury.
Well, I'll bring up a movie. Have you seen Juror Number 2 by Clint Eastwood? Have you seen that?
Yes.
That movie bothers me. I'm usually a big fan of Clint Eastwood movies. This movie bothered me because they represent the jury as a group of people who just want to go home. And I've seen this before in films, and it really bothers me because, at least in the cases I've looked at, it's like with Proctor in the Karen Reed case, it seems like it's a very rare occasion when you'd have anything like that happening. Most jurors get in there and they want to figure it out. And it seems like they take their job very seriously. And so I don't like how it's been dismissed. So I don't want to dismiss these jurors. I really feel like most of the time jurors go in, they really want to figure it out. And if they start smelling too much BS, I think that's why you see this. It doesn't mean that there's no way she didn't do this. It just means that given the evidence, given how everything came together, they didn't feel comfortable. And I guess if I was to pick on any juror, I would say it kind of bothers me that the juror foreman has come out and said they knew she had nothing to do with it from the beginning. That's concerning to me because then, well, were you listening? You're the leader and yet you already made up your mind in the beginning. That bothers me.
Well, I will say something, the witness intimidation by the media campaign was something altogether very concerning for anyone, no matter what you think about Karen Read. The fact that there are people who have not been indicted, and we're not talking one or two people, we're talking scores of people, not even in law enforcement, lay people who were at the house that night or teenagers, people who, whatever you think of Karen Read, their lives have been upended. That I do think is a direct result of the media campaign around it. And that is incredibly concerning because without witnesses, with this being the commonplace, this is where judges really do need to take absolute control of their courtroom because that will directly affect witnesses' willingness to come forward and cooperate in any investigation and their ability to even testify, to the best of their abilities, recognizing that there's this incredible campaign around them. Brett, welcome back.
No, I agree with everything you just said, Alice.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, but I think in this case, that had a massive play and that the witness intimidation certainly came from the media aspect of the case.
It's a real concern. I do have another question for you. So as attorneys looking at all these cases, have you ever found a verdict that you didn't agree with, but it's like you respected the process and felt sort of okay, even though you didn't agree with the final verdict?
Yeah, let me think about. Well, it's funny because I'll give you a couple examples of that. Take Leo Schofield. I give Leo Schofield as an example. We think Leo was wrongfully convicted, but given the evidence that the jury heard that was presented to them, I think the jury reached the right decision, which is a little weird, right? But I think his defense attorney would have had to have put on a different defense case. The prosecution did some things they shouldn't have done, but the jury analyzed the evidence correctly. They weighed it correctly, and they reached a verdict that was just. I mean, I think this is going to be a real controversial one. Joe in the chat is going to be excited. There's an argument that the Casey Anthony jury got it right, that the prosecution, because of the experts they used and the way they presented the evidence, didn't actually get to beyond a reasonable doubt on her, even though I think she absolutely did it. I don't have any doubt. But the jury's having to look at it through a different view. So, yeah, I mean, I think there are times where the verdict is the verdict. And I'll even say this. I mean, the Karen Read case, it's hard for me to actually see the reasonable doubt, but I understand the arguments people make as to why they have it. Does that make sense? Like, I don't agree with them, but I understand where they're coming from, if that makes sense.
Alice, it looked like you were ready to jump in with something.
No, I completely agree with the process. And we've said this, the justice system is not perfect. I think it is, at least the U.S. justice system, we're trying our best to get at the truth. But a verdict does not equal truth. Not guilty sometimes can line up with the truth, but there is a truth, and what our justice system is trying to get to, and what your podcast, what we're trying to get to is the truth. But the truth exists independent of whether I say it is or not. And so that's why I can respect the process and respect a verdict if there was no prosecutorial misconduct, all those sorts of things. Jurors weren't doing misconduct, looking up cases, talking to people they shouldn't have been. Yes, I can respect that process. But it is hard, obviously, when I think the evidence is something that should come out a different way and the jury disagrees with me.
Well, like I said, and it was right before Brett dropped out, but Brett, you were talking about speaking to law enforcement, hundreds of law enforcement. And that's where I was telling Alice, I really feel like, if you were upset by the Karen Read verdict, this is something, though, that can pay dividends. More law enforcement officers will do their due diligence. They'll keep their professionalism intact because they want that justice. I mean, most people in law enforcement, that's why they're there. They want to be part of that process, and holding themselves to a standard is just going to make sure they have a better chance of getting that justice.
No, you're right. And, the greatest football coach to ever live, Nick Saban, he used to say that you learn a lot more from losing a game than you do winning. Because if you win, it covers up your mistakes because you're like, oh, whatever, we won, right? But when you lose, you really think about it. And I think, that is a case that I think will be a warning that will be used in police academies around the country. And it's sad because you still have John O'Keefe who never got justice. Right. And he's never going to get justice.
That's the real takeaway. We don't know what'll ever happen there.
Nothing. And nothing will ever happen in that case. I mean, it's over. Right. Yeah. So, and you see that, and we've seen that before, and we'll see it again. But as Alice was saying, and as we said on our show, I mean, the justice system is designed for guilty people to go free. I mean, that's actually one of the maxims of the justice system is better for, depending on who you're quoting, 10 guilty men to go free than one innocent person to go to prison. And you can't have a system that ensures that innocent people don't go to prison to the best of our ability unless they're guilty people who are going to get off. So as difficult as it is, when you see a case where you really feel like an injustice was done, remember there's a reason for it. And that's something we always, whether we win or lose, we are always cautioning people. Be careful when you start talking about tearing down the system because you don't like the outcome in this case. Whatever it is, whether you think someone is wrongfully convicted or wrongfully acquitted, that is a path that is not going to lead anywhere that you like. I did want to ask you, you wouldn't tell me what your podcast defining case was. So I'll ask you this. What is your favorite case that you've covered? I know you've done 600 and something episodes, but you got to have a favorite. And give me a top 3.
There are just so many. When I think back and I think about the cases I really got into, sometimes it's the way people were able to survive horrible situations, things that you would think, how did they do this? How did they survive? Or someone being able to testify in court who should have had too much PTSD to show up that day. It's the strength of people, the willingness to survive. And not only that, but really it's about justice. It's when you're able to get justice no matter what. A good one is the Night Stalker, Ramirez. He was brought down by the public. I mean, how do you get a better ending than that? They actually got him or were punching him. I mean, he was already getting sentenced right there. But yeah, you can't even make that up. But I also do enjoy cases that there are a lot of questions in them, like what really happened here. And so those are ones that stick with me, like the Holly Bobo case. I feel like they screwed that one up. I'm hoping that there will be some changes coming soon in that one, and they can maybe get their focus back on the right person. But I don't know. I think as long as we're all talking out there, and if we're aligned on we're all just trying to find justice, and we have to respect the system. I mean, you're right. If we were to tear it all down and start over, it might come out a lot worse. There's a reason why certain things have either stayed this whole time or been slightly adjusted. It can't just be thrown all out and start over because there's a reason why it is the way it is. My biggest problem with the justice system is I feel like there's a little too much protection of prosecutors. And I only say that because I've seen cases where there's prosecutorial misconduct. There's what seems to be very obvious violations of people's rights by like just setting aside evidence that would be exculpatory, and nothing seems to happen. I don't understand why that should be. And I also feel like, once there is a victory in court for the prosecution, it seems like it's really hard to reverse that. And I have Framed season 3 coming out this year, which will be the 3rd season of it. It started back, I think, in 2018 or so. And I'm going to be looking at Temujin Kensu. And that's a case that, you might say, well, how the heck is he still behind bars? And some people would chime in. We have
said that, as a matter of fact.
Won't let him out. But there are some nuances in that case, too, that are really interesting to chew on and figure out, are these the reasons why he's still locked up, despite good evidence that he didn't do the crime? But that's another reason I get into cases, is because they're things that I want to talk about that maybe I don't hear other people talking about.
Well, we're closing in on an hour here. I want to be respectful of your time. 13 years. Hopefully another 13 years and more to come. You mentioned your 3rd season of Framed, but what else is on the horizon for you? What do you want to, take your podcast for the next decade or so?
13 years.
13 years. No pressure.
Well, one of the things I've enjoyed over the years is talking with other podcasters. We all have something in common, no matter how different we might be. So I always like talking with the other podcasters, the other people who maybe have even worked on cases we've talked about. It's so cool when you meet an FBI agent. Like we covered TW 800 back in the day, and I got to meet one of the FBI agents who worked the case. And he actually told me, he goes, "You guys did a great job on that one. I was really happy with the stuff you guys pointed out." And he, of course, he loved that we didn't get into the crazy conspiracies and buy into them. But it's just, I think between prosecutors and even the defense attorneys, you have the commentators, all we want is we want to try and get to the bottom of it. Obviously, the defense attorney, their job is to defend. But, you know, they're going to be important too, because they're going to have some clients here and there that are innocent. They may not be named Stephen Avery, but there are people out there that need that defense. So I like the whole thing. I like the court, and I admit to watching court TV too much. I love the whole process, and there's nothing better really than watching a case end the correct way with the correct verdict. And I feel like we get that a lot. So we're kind of spoiled.
So Aaron, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but our editor who edits our podcast, Jason Ussery, is actually doing a deep dive in the Temujin Kinsu case and has met with Temujin several times and been up to Michigan and driven the route and done everything else. And you guys could talk. There. Oh, great. Yeah.
That's where I'm from originally. Michigan's my favorite state.
It's everyone's favorite state, right? I mean,
no.
I've been to the airport.
People who are like, I live here. But yeah, no, I'll never turn down a chance to get up there. I love being up there.
I want to give a shout out to Othram, because even though we've like crossed paths before, the first time we ever really met was at the Othram showcase that we all got invited to at their headquarters. And so they're awesome. Support Othram. They're doing great work. But the best thing they did was we got to meet each other. So here we are.
That's right.
Yeah, it's not every time that someone wants to stop and chat. Sometimes people are like, I got to go, and they run off. So like when you turned and talked to me, it was pretty cool. But I mean, the Othram visit was great because we got to see behind the scenes just how things work. I love it when they can solve a case that's 37 years old, that it didn't seem like there's
137 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. It's like, hey, you thought you got away with something. Guess what? Nope. Because they've analyzed this. They found your DNA.
No, they're talking about doing the Lord's work. I mean, they are all over it.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing with us and kind of paving the way for podcasts like ours. And we love your podcast, you guys. If you're not listening to Generation Y, where have you been for 13 years? You can obviously go listen anywhere you find podcasts. Do you have any parting words? Because I do love your skepticism, but you're kind of, I always call myself a Pollyanna. You're kind of a little bit of a find the silver lining kind of guy. So I love that. And I love your deep analysis of the cases that you cover, and obviously the respect for the victims and the people involved in these cases. But do you have any parting words for our listeners today from 13 years of podcasting?
No, it's just, without the listeners, we'd all be just talking into microphones and there'd be no one listening on the other end. So whenever I'm at events, that going to CrimeCon and what have you, it's really cool when people come up and they just want to tell you maybe the first time they heard you, a case you maybe changed their opinion on, or now they want to tell you about how you were wrong on the last episode. But I love the interaction and I love the passion of the audience. We have a lot of smart people.
Will you be at CrimeCon this year? Speaking of CrimeCon?
I will be at Denver. Yeah. CrimeCon Denver.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We can't wait to see you there then.
I wouldn't miss it.
It's a great,
it's awesome.
Great event. Yeah, it really is. Well, glad we'll get to see you there this year. Aaron, thank you for giving us your time tonight. Sorry we could record so late, but we really
appreciate being on. That's great.
And we appreciate, again, all the work that you do trying to cut through the sensationalism to get to justice. We need more podcasts like yours, and you're welcome back anytime. We would obviously love it. Well, guys, we are so lucky to have been talking to Aaron all hour. You can go listen to Generation Y wherever you have podcasts. And Aaron, come back anytime. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs.
In this case, a fellow officer has died. The evidence is overwhelming, but because of what you did.
He dropped off. He got so excited. He got so excited about it.
Let me jump in here for a minute
Yeah.
because it seems guilty to me.
But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett. You got to say your name.
Aaron.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Let's do the BS, guys.
Yeah, it's just like it's right to it. Right to it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay.
That was awesome. Really appreciate it.
All right. So in the chat, thank you guys for joining us. Hope you enjoyed your
Just when you thought summer couldn't get any hotter, Pluto TV is turning up the heat with thousands of free movies. Presenting Summer of Cinema. Stream your favorite blockbuster films like Gladiator,
I will have my vengeance.
Good Burger,
This is what I call fast food!
Beverly Hills Cop, The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, and Julie and Julia.
Bon appetit!
All for free on your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.